President Joe Biden has canceled an order by former President Donald Trump to move the United States Space Command headquarters to Alabama. The Pentagon says the decision is due to readiness, but it comes as Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville has refused to okay promotions of senior generals and admirals, quote, in protest of a Pentagon policy that reimburses military personnel who have to travel to obtain an abortion or fertility treatments, the New York Times writes. Pentagon spokesperson Brigadier General Patrick Ryder says locating the headquarters in Colorado Springs, which is where it is currently located, quote, ultimately ensures peak readiness in the space domain for our nation during a critical period and would, quote, enable the command to most effectively plan, execute, and integrate military space power into multi-domain global operations.
The United States Space Force budget reached $30 million in a 2024 proposal from earlier this year, with the Department of Defense requesting $2.6 billion for national security space launch services, according to Space News. In response, the Empire Files tweeted, wonder if all the UFO stuff suddenly being entertained by Washington has anything to do with this. Hashtag UFO hearing.
Yeah, so this is a fascinating story. Remember that Tommy Tuberville has been on this campaign to hold up all of these military promotions, really pro forma sorts of things, because he doesn't like a provision that would allow service members to go to another state to get access to not just abortion care, but fertility care for female service members. And it's a fascinating posture, in part because historically, of course, it has been conservatives that accuse Democrats of not supporting the troops, harming the troops, et cetera. And Democrats have made gestures historically to say, well, we're the ones that want to give the troops health care. We're the ones that want to make sure they come home soon. And those have largely fallen on deaf
Democrats were also the ones who said, and you have to get that COVID vaccine or you're going to
Sure, but my point is contrasting the older posture to the contemporary posture now. And, you know, he's willing to die on this hill, seemingly, and Joe Biden now has a response, which is to say your state is not going to get this facility, which presumably would have advantaged it and the people who live there.
Sure. I mean, the facility should just go in whatever is the most logical, cheapest, and most efficient way for the facility to be. I don't, like this idea of we're going to give it to the most best politically connected person. It should just be whatever saves the government the most money and is the most logical place is where it should be.
Well, it's staying where it is, which seems to be the most logical thing.
Fine. Separately, yes, I would say the same thing about Tuberville's stand as I would about any other private medical decision involving the troops or anyone else. It's none of the government's business. And, trying to force the troops who want these kinds of things to not be able to, like that, it seems.
Well, but people say it is the government's business because the government is paying for their health care.
Yeah.
So we live in this
problem.
We live in this bizarre world where one of the few ways that poor people can get access to health care and education in the United States of America is to enlist in the military. Many people cite that as the reason for them joining up in the first instance. My best friend entered the Navy for the same reason, to pay for college. And it suddenly, to have that be the largest socialized medicine program in the United States, I guess Medicare would be that, but one of the largest kind of socialized institutions in the United States of America, at the same time that you're going to say that basically religious preferences and political preferences are going to dictate the healthcare outcomes of the people who join up for the explicit purpose of healthcare is kind of a dark place. But that's where we got over the years of the courts slowly deciding that these kind of independent, personal, religious or cultural expectations should be writ large into public policy, as opposed to being an issue between a person and their doctor.
When you have a government-run system, some people whose tax money is used to fund the government system have religious objections to how it's spent, and Senator Tuberville is representing them in this crusade.
And yet the courts have not decided that I can have a kind of ethical, dare I say, religious exemption to my tax dollars being spent on endless wars.
I mean, but this is the exact same thing. You could have a senator who refuses to allow any of these military promotions to go through because of your inability to opt out of religious or of spiritual or just based
I think the difference is because it's the religious liberty exceptions, it's the constitutional protections for free exercise that have been used as a linchpin for people getting the kind of abortion, Hobby Lobby style abortion exemptions.
Right, I mean, those people had to fight very stridently for that kind of recognition
to suppress their employees' ability to get health care. Yes, they fought and they won in the Supreme Court
for things,
and they won in the Supreme Court because they were able to exploit the constitutional protections for free exercise of religion. If I don't shroud it in some religious objective, or even if I say my religion says I'm a pacifist and does not support me spending on war,
but I completely support that.
The problem is that the courts don't recognize all religions equally and don't recognize spiritual beliefs that aren't traditional in some sense, and would not support me being able to use those same kinds of religious protections to preclude my tax dollars being used in the same way.
Absolutely support you being able to opt out of paying your taxes for any reason, Briahna. For a religious reason, for a psychological reason, for anything to constrain the growth of our government. So,
all right. Well, what do you make of this idea that the emphasis, the public interest, the willingness of Congress to have hearings on the UFO sightings,
well, you're big on this is a distraction thing,
it's because of the huge budget. I mean, let's go over the numbers that we read again. The Space Force budget reached $30 billion in a 2024 proposal from earlier this year. Department of Defense requesting another $2.6 billion for national security space launch services. Is big alien curiosity a boon for big Space Force funding? I mean,
presumably demonstrating the existence of aliens would be an even bigger bonanza for defense spending, right? If the public knew and they saw proof that aliens are real, that they have spacecrafts, they've visited Earth, they've crashed into Earth, I think the public acceptance of a ballooning defense budget would be very high. So if they have something to show, they should probably just show. If their goal is just to maximize revenue for the Defense Department, the secret is not doing them a lot of good.
Yeah, I mean, there are, of course, conspiracy theorists who think we never landed on the moon. The idea of space as an excuse to justify funding that goes into a black hole of God knows what somewhere else is not a new conspiracy theory. I'm not entirely sure about that one.
There's some kind of psyop going on. I just don't know what it is. Don't know what it is. Well, meanwhile, confidence in the United States military is the lowest in over 2 decades, recent Gallup polling finds. The latest numbers are from a June poll, found that United States confidence in the military has fallen to only 60%. Last time it was this low was in 1997. I'm not sure what's going on then. More specifically, Republican confidence in the military has declined over 20 percentage points in 3 years, from 91% to 68%, according to the survey. I think that's fascinating and supports an argument I've been making often on this show, is that skepticism of institutions used to be more specific for each institution, what Democrats are skeptical of, what Republicans are skeptical of. But now the Republican Party is the party of skepticism in general. It's the party that does not have faith in institutions, whether that's universities, schools, wokeness everywhere, national intelligence, the health czars. It even is now extending to the military, which is something that Republicans wouldn't want to be rah-rah military historically, or at least in the Bush, Clinton, Reagan years, I guess. That's all coming to an end now. It's a different party. It's a party of people who have doubts about large institutions, including very American ones.
I largely agree with that with some caveats. I think there's still pretty full-throated support for the police, despite their repeated targeting and over-policing of low-income communities, including the majority of poor people in America who are, in fact, white. And then also, I think that there is still broadly an overwhelming support within the Republican Party and certainly Republican leadership for foreign intervention. And there might be a preference for a war with China versus a war in Ukraine, but I have some skepticism about how substantial the anti-war critique is from the right when it is so narrowly focused on the war in Ukraine, which is a tacit way to criticize Joe Biden and has these political valences. What happens when it's no longer Biden's war? Is there still going to be an appetite for anti-intervention? We'll see. Maybe I'm too skeptical. I'm happy to be proven wrong.
You're so skeptical, you should join the Republican Party. That's where all the skeptics are. We'll have more Rising right after this.